Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Silent Bob, and all those terrible Jay and Silent Bob type pictures, man. You're listening to Drop the Mic, the only podcast that I listen to that I'm not a part of. Every podcast I listen to, I usually talk on it, but not fucking Drop the Mic. That's where I'm like, let me hear what the boys have to say. And now, we drop the mic.
We have a call, Chief. Somebody's bleeding. 44th and A. Saving someone's life is like falling in love. You wonder if you become immortal, as if you've saved your own life as well. But taking credit when things go right doesn't work the other way. Things way too seriously, Frank.
You look like you aged about 10 years since I rode with you last.
Come on, Frank. There's blood spilling in the streets. Let's go have some fun.
It was the neighborhood I grew up in, and where I had worked most as a paramedic. And it held more ghosts per square foot than any other.
Why did you kill me, Frank?
I didn't kill you.
No, you didn't, Frank, and thank you, but there's still a couple hours left on our ship.
I've seen the ghosts.
You ever notice people who see things are always crazy?
You swore that you'd fire me if I came in late again. You swore.
Nobody gets fired, son. Look at me.
You have the power, Jesus, to spare this worthless man. Rise up! I'll be begging!
Damn, you guys are good.
Everyone at that hospital's crazy!
That's ridiculous.
Don't make me take off my sunglasses.
Come on, Frank! Get with the program!
You feeling better, Frank?
I think the worst is over.
Oh, no. It can always get worse.
Nicolas Cage.
Help others and you help yourself, with my motto. I understood how crazy it was to think this way. But then, something good will happen. Everything just glows.
Don't try.
Frank!
Are you okay?
Never felt better in my life. How are you?
I'm good. Good.
You can't put your arm around me.
Directed by Martin Scorsese.
You can't put your arm around me.
Welcome back to our San Diego podcast. We're your hosts, Wesley Swanson and Chris Pawlak. This is our end of the month takeover with episode 340, The Burnout Shift, where we will be exploring Scorsese's hidden masterpiece, Bringing Out the Dead. But before the review, let's get warmed up, shall we? What's up, Chris?
What's going on, man?
How are you? Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be sitting in the conference room with you.
That's right.
Doing the show. Got a little bit of some festive stuff going on behind us.
Yeah, we do.
And the Christmas music soundtrack in the background. Hopefully not picking up on the mic.
What have you been up to lately? Anything cool?
I mean, if baking is cool, then yeah. Because I did a shitload of that over the last week and a half. Nice. Even made 2 things today before I came down to do the show. Half of which is in the car waiting for you to take home.
Everybody out there, this guy's a master. Master in the kitchen. He'll probably tell you otherwise, but don't listen to him.
Just recently, too. It's like under a year still that I've been doing it.
And now for a special news report. Brought to you by Drop the Mic.
What do you have for us on the news front this week? Anything cool?
Well, yeah, I have a death that, another one that was just very recent, but one that we missed in September. I'm not sure how I missed it, but want to say R.I.P. to Michael Gambon. He died in September. I hate to say this. Most people know him as Dumbledore from the Harry Potter movies. But he was much better than that. Good actor. He's in The Life Aquatic. He's in Fantastic Mr. Fox. That's probably my favorite scene in that movie. And I know that that's a stop motion movie, so it's not actually him, but it's his voice. When Jarvis Cocker is like singing that, Petey is singing that song around the campfire, and he walks up. And after the song is finished, he's like, "That's a bad song. You wrote a bad song." And he like flicks the cigarette at him. But Layer Cake, he's great in Layer Cake. Open Range, he's the villain in Open Range. He's really good in that.
Mm-hmm.
The Insider, he's so good in The Insider. Very, very menacing towards Russell Crowe. We're going to talk about The Insider a little bit later on tonight. And just, he died in September. I don't know how I missed it. I feel bad about that. We should have talked about him in the LA Confidential episode. So my apologies, but I wanted to shout him out, Michael Gambon.
I know about that, so I don't know how we missed it.
Yeah, he died just before we did the record. I don't know why I just missed it, but I was going through, some stuff and some notes and some emails and everything that I had from back around that time, and then I found that and was like, shit, like, we missed that. So I want to give him a late shout out. My apologies. The other one was Shane MacGowan from the Pogues. Passed away.
Is that 2 days ago?
Yeah, 2 or 3 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, big Pogues fan. He had his issues, but a very seminal, would you say punk? Not necessarily a punk band. Punk, like folk rock. What would you call them? Celtic punk?
Yeah.
Folk punk?
They're kind of like a early version of Dropkick Murphys or something like that.
Okay. Right? But they also did a lot of ballads too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, their very, very famous Christmas song, like Fairy Tale of New York, is no punk song at all. But
I mean, think about like a band that you love, like The Clash, are kind of grouped in as punk, and they did so much, different work, which I'm sure we're going to talk about them a little bit tonight too in this episode,
because they got 2 tracks on this soundtrack.
Yeah. And it works so well on the screen.
Yeah. So, R.I.P. to Shane MacGowan. The Pogues were a bit before my time, at least in their prime. But that's another band I wish I could have seen. So I know that Joel was really bummed out because he's a big Pogues fan. If you want to, dude nails the song, but if you want to see like a funny video on YouTube, look up The Irish Rover.
Mm-hmm.
That they sang. They collaborated with the I believe the Dubliners. Shane MacGowan looks like he's lost. Like while he's singing, he nails the song, but he looks like he's in another place. He's probably drunk. But yeah, he looks like he just wandered in from somewhere and doesn't know exactly where he is. But check that out. Look up The Irish Rover with him and the Pogues and the Dubliners. So those are the 2 deaths I have. Some other news since you and I last spoke. The actor strike is finally over.
Mm-hmm.
Good news. Some of the things that they won in that was that the SAG minimums were raised by 7%. Much like the Writers Guild contract, there will be streaming residual bonus going to actors on streaming shows that surpass performance benchmarks. So many people watch this show. And then as well as building up some funds for actors that might not be on such popular shows so that they're taken care of. Also some protections in place against the use of AI. The studios apparently still can create digital copies of people, but only with their express permission.
Okay.
That's what I found to kind of be like some of the major bullet points as to what was gained in the strike, but that ended on the 10th of November. Hopefully some stuff should be in motion again, and we don't have too many more delays.
It seems like everything's kind of kicking off again. Like I know they just finished production on Beetlejuice 2. I guess when they stopped for the strike,
they were very close.
Yeah, right. He had only a couple days left to finish, which is insane. But yeah, that's done. And hopefully a lot of great projects to come down the pipe now.
Yeah, I hope so. Speaking of a great project coming down the pipe, Dune, which that I was got bumped because of the strikes.
Mm-hmm.
Its release date was March 15th. Now that's moved up to March 1st. So get to see that a couple weeks early, which is awesome. Still wish it would have been out for the holidays. But March 1st is when it's going to come out. Watch it in IMAX. I'm really excited for it. Can't wait to see the second part.
Should be good. Everybody go support that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really hoping. I know that there were some people that really didn't care for the first part, or were waiting to watch the second part where they can watch them both together, because it was kind of a gamble with just having the first half, not knowing if that was going to be successful, and Warner Brothers was going to greenlight the second half, which they should have from the jump, because that's a very popular book and it's got its built-in fan base. So I mean, I'm glad that they did, but they also were in the middle of their day and date release where it was on streaming the same day too. So I know that kind of cuts into the box office, but I mean, I wanted to go see it in IMAX, and I did a couple of times. So I'm glad that the second part's coming out. I'm really looking forward to it. Probably one of the most anticipated movies for me next year. And you and I spoke about this a couple weeks ago, off mic, of course. But for the first time, James Cameron, The Abyss, and True Lies are going to be available high def, remastered. And The Abyss is even getting a special one-night-only screening of Cameron's director's cut. That's coming up this week, as you and I are recording. It's a few days from now, and unfortunately, it's only playing in a few theaters around town, and it was all sold out.
Really?
Yeah, I tried looking a few days ago, or sometime last week, and it was all sold out, which is a bummer because I wanted to see it, but I just wish more theaters would have had it, or would have been around for more than just one night only. But that's cool. I mean, The Abyss is a movie that famously has not been remastered. Everyone's been looking for it.
To my knowledge, they put it like the 4K version up on, was it Max or something, right?
Yeah, because HBO or Cinemax has been playing it for a few years in obviously high def. But why it was never available physically to buy
for so long.
It's a bummer that it took him that long to get that done, especially his director's cut, which enhances that movie a lot more, in my opinion. So I'm really excited for that, because I've had that special edition DVD for 25 years now and been waiting to get it in high def. That and True Lies. Why True Lies was never in high def, I have no idea. But that's another one that's been on, HBO or Cinemax from time to time. And because those are the Lightstorm movies that he's working on getting in high def, you know what I'm going to ask for. Let's see some Strange Days, man. Let's see Strange Days remastered.
When I saw all of those, I was hoping that would come up in the conversation, and it did not. Well, not yet. Not yet.
I mean, that was part of his deal, was I think the 3 movies that he had to deal with for Lightstorm was True Lies, Strange Days, and Titanic. Titanic obviously was remastered and released in multiple different versions, but for some reason True Lies and The Abyss and Strange Days never have until now, except Strange Days, which is on HBO right now as we speak, just not in the proper aspect ratio for whatever reason. And it drives me fucking crazy every time I see it. So hopefully someday we'll get a Strange Days. So that's my news. That's what I have for you. What do you got?
I just got one thing that I wanted to talk about with you. George Miller's first trailer.
Oh, yes.
For Furiosa is officially out, and it looks promising, with Anya Taylor-Joy stepping in as the younger version of the beloved Fury Road character. And it also co-stars Chris Hemsworth.
Isn't he the young Morton Joe, or is he someone else?
So that's what I thought they were leaning toward, is that he was going to take over for Morton Joe. But in the trailer, he's kind of does like a face-off with a Morton Joe. Yeah. So unless that's they're trying to throw us off, it's not him.
Or that's someone that has that mask and then
he takes over.
He takes it over.
Yeah.
And he becomes a Morton Joe.
Yeah.
I was a little bit worried because that trailer is a little CGI heavy.
That's what I've heard. People are kind of on the fence about, yeah.
So maybe that's just, have to show you some flashy scenes for the trailer.
It looks a little polished, yeah.
But because that's always been what makes those movies so goddamn good is a lot of it is practical. And obviously Fury Road does have some CGI in it.
It does.
But a lot of that stuff is practical. So I'm hoping that the CGI just is... We're leaning into it a little heavy for the trailer, but the actual film doesn't have nearly as much as the trailer makes it seem.
I hope not. But I'm excited.
Me too, yeah.
And Hemsworth looks good. I guess a lot of people were distracted, and it's all, dude, it's called acting. Because they changed like his face or whatever, his nose. I don't know. I think he looks good.
People win Academy Awards for uglying themselves up.
It's a dystopian film, guys. You can't look like Thor all the time. All right. But I'm excited. I hope it's good.
Yeah, me as well.
And now it's time for the weekly recommendations.
I want to shout out the National Geographic documentary miniseries, One Day in America, on the JFK assassination.
Okay.
It was awesome. Watched that last week, Joelle and I, on the anniversary, because that's what we do. We get together and watch some JFK related stuff. And we were watching that this year. Very, very good. Excellent. Like the interviews that they have with some of the people that were there or ex-Secret Service agents. Incredible. And the footage, wow. Like some of that footage is incredible. Just how clean it is after all these years. They really did a lot of work to restore. They colorized some of it, but it doesn't look awful. Like old TNT when they used to colorize the movies back in the 80s or 90s whenever Ted Turner was doing that. No, it looks really good. I'm guessing a lot of they use a lot of AI to colorize that stuff now. But just very, very good. If you've ever seen the one that they did on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, the One Day in America on the 9/11 attacks. Wow, it very harrowing to watch, but oh my god, was that one of the best documentary series I've ever seen in my life, and they really followed it up with the JFK one. So shout out the One Day in America, the JFK miniseries. You can find that. It was on Nat Geo, but I think Nat Geo has a deal with Hulu or Disney Plus, like one of those, or maybe even both of them.
Okay,
where you should be able to find that on either or. And then I want to shout out another underrated Scorsese movie called After Hours, which is a very good movie, a comedy, one that he made in the decade where he wasn't having a whole lot of success. He was trying to get it together to do Last Temptation of Christ. And I think Paramount was supposed to do it originally and had backed out on him because of the controversy. So he was just kind of doing some stuff, scraping by to survive, and he does this little kind of indie cult comedy called After Hours with Griffin Dunn and Rosanna Arquette, her sister, who's in Bringing Out the Dead, the movie we're going to talk about tonight. Cheech and Chong, John Hurd, the great Catherine O'Hara. God, who else is in that movie? Terry Garr. Just a really great cast and really funny. And Griffin Dunn's this guy who goes on the date and is trying all night long to get out of the Soho neighborhood in New York, and everything is just going wrong for him. And he just can't seem to get out of it. So I highly recommend that. I just rewatched that not too long ago. It's available. Criterion just came out with a version of it. I picked that up. So shout out to After Hours.
Very nice. Just those two?
Just those two. That's what I got for you.
All right, I have one. It's now available on Netflix. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off.
That's the animated series, right?
Yeah. serves as a reimagining of the graphic novels and was developed by Brian Lee O'Malley. The cast from the 2010 Edgar Wright film adaptation also returns to voice the characters.
Oh, cool.
I'm like 3 episodes in right now, and it's totally veers off from like what you know. It doesn't follow the movie. It doesn't even follow like the books, the narrative of the book. So it's something fresh for everybody to like a new take on that story, which is pretty fun. And it's the way it's animated is very like traditional anime. So there's a lot of humor that comes through with that as well. And it's just funny to hear like, Aubrey Plaza and all these characters that we were familiar with from the live action come through through the cartoons.
That's cool that they got the cast from the movie back, because that cast is really stacked.
It is.
And a lot of those people went on to be bigger stars than they were at the time. So it's cool that they were able to get them back to do the show.
Yeah. If you're into that, check it out because it's fun. The episodes are like 30 minutes long. So there's only 8 episodes, so it's not a big commitment,
Cool.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now for the movie focus of the week.
All right, so this week we're talking about Bringing Out the Dead. It's rated R. It's from 1999. It's a psychological drama. It runs at 2 hours and 1 minute, and it's got a 73% on Rotten. Written by Paul Schrader, directed by the great Martin Scorsese, starring Nicolas Cage, Patricia Arquette, Ving Rhames, John Goodman, Mark Anthony, Tom Sizemore, Cliff Curtis, and Michael Kenneth Williams, R.I.P.
That's right. I didn't know that was him, obviously, when I saw the movie originally. And then over the years, since I was such a big fan of like The Wire, and I was like, oh shit, it's like Michael K. Williams.
The film follows a New York paramedic in the early 90s and his numerous run-ins with both co-workers and bystanders. Bringing Out the Dead was at first a novel by author Joe Connolly, who wrote the book based on his experiences as an actual New York paramedic. Scorsese eventually found the book and approached Touchstone Pictures to take on the project. Once they agreed, Scorsese then went to a familiar writing partner in Paul Schrader to help pen the screenplay. For those who might be unfamiliar, Schrader has already collabed on some of the director's most memorable early works, such as Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. Once the screenplay was completed, Scorsese set out to hire the cast, already having Nick Cage in mind, and with the blessing of fellow auteur Brian De Palma, Cage was offered the lead role of Frank Pierce, to which the actor swiftly accepted. With Scorsese still unsure of who should be cast as the female lead in Mary Burke, Cage offered up his then-wife at the time, Patricia Arquette, who was hired almost immediately. The rest of the cast we've come to know soon followed. The film's depressing tone did have an overall negative effect on both the cast and crew, as they were shooting mostly nights, resulting in colds and bad moods. For Martin Scorsese, a rush of memories would come flooding back, as he had been all too familiar with the interiors of an ambulance a few years before while tending to his parents. Scorsese has been known to say that his time on set for Bringing Out the Dead was one of the worst experiences making a film that he had had up until that point. The film was released by Paramount Pictures on October 22nd, 1999, followed by an international release done by Touchstone and Buena Vista International. The film only grossed a disappointing $16.7 million against its estimated $32 million budget. The project would ultimately be snubbed with 0 nominations and mixed reviews overall. Bringing Out the Dead might arguably be Scorsese's most criminally underappreciated film. Beautifully edited by Thelma Schoonmaker and equally engaging and darkly kinetic cinematography by Robert Richardson. Everything about this movie, including the score by Elmer Bernstein and existing music by artists like The Who, Van Morrison, The Clash, and Frank Sinatra, all make this film a wholly original and pretty thrilling cinematic adventure. Scorsese seamlessly blending various genres together with ease. Let's not forget the effective ensemble cast who all bring something on screen, with Cage giving what I believe is his career best performance. I said what I said. Check this film out if you haven't yet, or revisit it right now. Available on digital with a brand new 4K transfer 4 out of 5 rage cages. Thank you.
I'm not going to argue the cage point, but have you seen Adaptation?
Yes. It's very close. Very close. And then his new one looks really good as well. What is it, A24? No, Neon? Can't remember.
I think it's Neon.
Where he's in everybody's dreams?
Yeah.
I hear that looks pretty good.
I got a list of like great Nick Cage performances. This is very near the top, but Adaptation is always the one that I always put at the very tip top because I think he's brilliant in that movie and criminally overlooked for that performance as well.
That's the about screenwriting, right?
Yeah, and he plays a dual role.
Remember, I watched that for when I was in film school.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think even Cage says that this is his favorite movie or his favorite performance of his.
Like, I don't know if I could see anybody else as Frank now.
It's really hard, right? Do we have a list of people that were approached, or I didn't find anything in my research. I mean, I know that it was in my notes, and you had it in your write up that De Palma, who is very close friends with Scorsese, had just worked with them on Snake Eyes, which isn't a great film, but had recommended Cage to Scorsese, and Scorsese wanted to work with him, and vice versa. So that was already a match made in heaven. But I don't know if anyone else that Scorsese had considered, or maybe the studio had considered for this role.
So I know when I was doing my research, I did find that when he agreed to take on this part, and even when Schrader was completed with the screenplay, that he had always envisioned Cage as that character, but it was just like whether he was going to want to do it or not. And I guess Scorsese kind of used knowing Francis Ford Coppola, who is
his uncle,
is Cage's uncle, as the kind of jumping off point of getting to him or whatever. And I mean, who the fuck is crazy enough to shoot down Scorsese, right?
Yeah,
you do it.
I have a good one for you, which would have been a good reteaming. What about Ray Liotta? I mean, he could kind of play that live wire.
Have you seen Turbulence?
I have seen Turbulence.
So he can do it. Yeah.
I mean, he was great as kind of the on edge haunted cop in Copland a year or two prior to this movie. I think he might have been a solid choice if Cage had turned it down. But that's the only one off the top of my head that I can think of right now that may have been pretty good in the role. And it would have been nice to see the two of them reteam.
Do you think, because of Liotta's, obviously he was carrying weight at that time still from Goodfellas, do you think more people would have went to see this or participated in it had it been not Cage?
Maybe.
Or do you think it has nothing to do with that and it was just that it was mismarketed as something it wasn't?
I would argue even that, because I don't really think that it was mismarketed. At least the Thelma Schoonmaker quote about it says it was kind of marketed as a car chase film, but I still don't get that vibe off that trailer. When I watched it the first time back in 1999, and when I watched it, just recently in research for the show, obviously 99 is an incredible year for film. That's a very, very strong fall. Maybe it just got lost in the shuffle. Cage has always been kind of a divisive actor. I love him. I can't say I have glowing reviews for his like kind of straight to streaming work or straight to Redbox work in the last decade or so. But I mean, Adaptation, Wild at Heart, 8mm, which is the same year as Bringing Out the Dead, he's very good in. Obviously, Leaving Las Vegas, which he won an Academy Award for, was 4 or 5 years before this. We've been on it before, but I love everything that he's doing in Face Off. He's great in The Rock, another movie a Cage movie that you and I have spoken about and on the show was Raising Arizona, which I love him in. So he's someone that I really enjoy, and I was really excited to see him in this movie. But maybe other people were not. Maybe he just kind of had that vibe. But he had done some big budget action movies after he wins the Academy Award. And he was kind of leaning into that. And then he goes back into drama with this one. Matchstick Men, that's another great one.
With Sam Rockwell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if another actor in this role would have brought him in. I mean, you could throw like a Tom Cruise or something in the movie, and I'm sure people would go see it because it's a Tom Cruise movie, but it wouldn't have the same effect as Nicolas Cage, who was very haunted throughout this entire film, literally and figuratively.
With something like this and it not doing well or being like a financial failure of sorts, it's kind of like, well, this is why people don't do original ideas, because then people don't pay attention to them, because you don't. Is there another movie that you can say that puts the spotlight on an occupation the way that this does?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we always see movies about cops and all this stuff, but not paramedics in this way. You know what I mean? It's like super original, and it's done in this very almost like anti-structure way where there's not really a plot. You're just kind of following along this guy.
It's basically like hanging out with this guy on the weekend, and this crazy weekend that he has, these 3 shifts in a row. And I mean, I watch it now. I always loved it, always thought it was a masterpiece, always thought it was extremely underrated. Joel's like, dude, this is a good movie to watch in the fall because it's kind of bleak, and you could feel like how cold and miserable it is. But you watch it and it's drama, but there's also some really fucking funny scenes in it.
It's got some good jokes.
Like, with each one of his partners. Each one of his partners is great in their own way. But like some of those scenes play like a straight comedy. The Ving Rhames stuff especially.
Oh yes. Which we'll get to in a little bit.
But even some of the scenes in the hospital, like
with the security
with Chris. But also like, the doctor who's just over it, nurse Constance, who just never wants to take care of people, who's always like, oh, like, is it our fault that you overdosed on drugs? Like, why should we have to take care of you? Why don't you overdose on drugs in a different city next time? Which is funny because she's always telling people that, but when they bring in the drunk, when Cage and Goodman bring in the drunk that they all hate, that they don't want to bring in, she's like so kind and loving towards him, and
she's like, all he needs is a shower. He's good.
But everyone else, she's like giving them shit. So like those scenes are very funny, even though they shouldn't be because they're very serious. But it's kind of like a black comedy.
Yes,
a lot of those scenes, and then some of the stuff is very dramatic. It's about death and guilt, and when giving people the dignity to die, because Mr. Burke is being kept alive for no other reason other than his family wants to keep him alive.
Yeah, because he was technically passed away far longer than he should have been had it was for it to be successful.
Yeah.
And then they were able to revive him, but it's kind of like he's a vegetable.
Basically, yeah.
Kind of, right?
Yeah. It's like his heart is going, but just because that's what it does. But like you hear him, the doctors and nurses talk about, like, they've had to shock him, back in the teens that many times. It's kind of like it's time to let him go.
Very eerie stuff when it's like, because there's I don't know if it's supposed to come off as supernatural, but when like Mr. Burke is talking to Frank, where he's like, you son of a bitch, like, just let me go or whatever, and he doesn't do it. Very eerie stuff, the way that's shot. I love it.
So like it kind of jumps around in genres throughout, and I think that's what makes it so great. It's very kinetic, like especially that last section, that last third of it with Sizemore as his partner, where they're just like going crazy, and like the film speed is all ramped up.
It's very Tony Scott.
Yeah. Maybe that was kind of a turnoff, was that it wasn't a straight drama or it wasn't a straight comedy. Like it was kind of a mashup of a lot of things. I mean, not necessarily a horror movie, but obviously he's haunted by the ghost of, especially of Rose.
Yeah, there's notes of that.
Someone that he lost.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's eerie. Even the Elmer Bernstein soundtrack on a couple of points sounds like the Ghostbusters soundtrack when Ghostbusters is trying to be eerie.
Mm-hmm.
Elmer Bernstein did the Ghostbusters soundtrack, for those of you who don't know that. He's been brought up multiple times in this episode, or this show, especially when we talked about Ghostbusters. But there's a couple of cues that sound like they could be from the Ghostbusters soundtrack. And then watching it again, I was like, oh, like a lot of this music sounds like it could be Terrence Blanchard's score from a Spike Lee movie. Spike Lee might have been a great director for this too.
New York.
Yep. So I don't know, like it's kind of hard to tell, like when a movie doesn't do well, what is it exactly? Stars not big enough? I mean, I told you before, and I think I even said it in our preview of the episode. I remember people famously walking out of this when I was watching it 2 or 3 times in the theater. Why? I don't know. Not what they expected, I guess.
Do you remember, or was it like, you said nothing was particularly offensive happening, they just lost interest?
Sometimes being in movies, it's a movie that's you kind of wonder like what movie they thought they were going to go see, and someone just gets up and walks out, like the movie's not working for them, whatever. But still, I was always like, wait, why are people walking out of this movie? This movie's great.
Can I share a story with you?
Absolutely, you can. It's your show.
So when I don't know, when would you say that this came out on VHS? 2000?
Oh yeah, if this opens October 99, it's probably like by the summer 2000 it's available.
Okay, because I remember vividly, obviously I didn't go see this in the theater, but my grandfather did bring it home. Mm-hmm. He rented it. And I remember watching it. I don't know if he was there, but watching it with my grandmother, right? And she was not into it.
Mm-hmm.
Like halfway through, it was like, I don't know if the concept went over her head or if it was just too grim for her or whatever, but she was kind of like, just kind of kept complaining like, oh, this is not for me. This is not, like, I don't understand the point of this,
mm-hmm.
And I always remember that, thinking like, what's wrong? This is great,
mm-hmm.
And I was obviously just a kid, but that's how long I've had this kind of relationship with this movie. And I just wanted to share that before I forgot.
So your grandmother is one of those people that may have walked out on the movie if she saw it in the theater.
Yeah. I don't know if she ended up turning it off and I finished it later alone, but she was not a fan. But she's also not a fan of a lot of things,
mm-hmm.
I remember even with like something like Fight Club, she was like, yeah, that wasn't for me. And I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, I know it kind of looks like Fincher's style, this one,
mm-hmm.
Bringing Out the Dead or whatever, but a lot of people seem to compare this to Fight Club with the narration and whatnot,
mm-hmm.
which they came out in the same year.
They came out they came out a week apart.
Mm-hmm.
October was a very strong month, 1999, man. You had Three Kings coming out. You had Fight Club. You had Bringing Out the Dead. Like, incredible films. We'll get into Academy Award stuff later. All 3 of those are in my top 5 for the year. Yeah, I can definitely see, the style and the look of it, like, would be Fight Club. The cinematography is very close. The narration. So I could definitely see that. But yeah, it always kind of bugged me that this was an overlooked Scorsese movie. Did it even have like a red carpet? I have no idea.
Premiere? I don't think it did.
I have no idea. But it's hard to have me tell you where I would rank it among his films because there's just so many great movies in there and very few of them that I don't care for or, have no desire to watch again. But I remember when, CJ had his rankings of Scorsese movies, and I was like, wow, like this movie's far too low.
Not good.
Yeah. But there's obviously ones that are better than others, or ones I would rank higher than others. And then there's some like, After Hours, which I recommended at the top of the show, which I think is a very, very great movie that kind of gets overlooked because it's the 80s was a weird decade for him.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd put it towards the top. It's so much fun. But what do you bump to put that up? Who knows? Hugo is another one that I think CJ had far too low. And that I adore Hugo. But like, is it a top 5 Scorsese? That's hard because think of the bangers,
mm-hmm.
So I hope that by us talking about this movie, doing this show, hopefully that'll bring some new eyes to it. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. I don't know if it's available to watch. Hopefully Amazon at least will let you, rent it for a few bucks.
Well, that's why I said what I said at the end of my write-up, is because I know for a fact it's on Apple Digital to buy, and it's like $5.
Okay.
And it's a transfer. It looks amazing.
Yeah, because this is another movie that famously is not available on Blu-ray. A lot of the Touchstone has a lot of movies like this one, and a lot of the Spike Lee movies that he did for Touchstone are not available in high def. Right. Yeah, Touchstone is a subsidiary of Disney, which I don't even know if Touchstone exists anymore.
I want to say
no. Do. Yeah. Which is weird. Like all these movie studios that used to exist don't anymore. And maybe they were just in trouble, but they had huge, huge movies. I mean, Shyamalan did a string of his movies for Touchstone. Yeah, like I'd have to go back and look, but they had like big movies. So it's weird that Touchstone isn't around anymore. But I wish this one was available digitally, talking about The Abyss and True Lies earlier. This and, like I said, a handful of Spike Lee movies that I did for Touchstone. So that always bugged me. Even watching it on DVD, like, it works because, like, the grittiness of the film and the way that it's shot works, even in low def.
Yeah, it doesn't bother you. Right?
No.
But, yes, for anybody out there who's listening to this who doesn't own the film, go buy it digitally until we get a Criterion or something.
That would be amazing. I would love for there to be a Criterion.
There is a Blu-ray available, but I think it's like an all-region thing, like an import.
Yeah, Strange Days is the same way, where it's if you want like the European import, you can get it on Blu-ray. Aha! In my notes, I do have that Schrader was thinking of Ed Norton for Frank Pierce, but I think Edward Norton is wrapped up in Fight Club when this goes into production, because those movies, as we said not too long ago, come out within a week of each other.
That would have been interesting. Or like say he doesn't do Fight Club and he does this. I think that could have worked.
What if he and Cage swap roles?
Cage and Fight Club that would have been. I would love to, go to that alternate universe to watch that movie to see how he acts against Pitt, assuming that Pitt's still Tyler Durden.
I think Tyler Durden would have been like, "Whoa, you're too crazy for me, dude. I'm out."
He just kills himself.
Speaking of Nicolas Cage, like, shout out to Joel, my best friend, who sent me a Nicolas Cage video earlier today. He was on some talk show. It was like when he was super young, maybe early 80s. But he comes with this crazy energy that I can only describe as, if you've seen Wild at Heart, like that's the energy that he has.
Is it the one where he does like a cartwheel on stage?
He's doing like karate kicks and everything. He's got like a leather jacket on.
I think I've seen that.
You seen that one? Okay. It very much reminded me of like his whole deal in Wild at Heart, especially the beginning when he gets out of jail and he's like in the dance club and his whole thing was his snakeskin jacket. What I'm saying is we're going to do Wild at Heart on the show one of these days. But there was that energy that he had, that live wire energy, and I'm like, oh, that's like big Wild at Heart energy that he's got right there.
Also, you were saying that his more modern stuff isn't great, but he has Mandy, which I'm a champion of.
Yeah, he's kind of had this resurgence in the last 5 or 6 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think he paid off his IRS bill, and now he's kind of getting back to some serious stuff.
Pig was
another big one. I'm trying to think, like, what was the last like big studio movie? I guess Renfield.
Is that a big studio?
That was Universal.
Yeah. Which didn't make money.
Didn't do much.
But they spent far too much on it.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, I think that was probably the last big studio movie. But what before that? I mean, like you said, he's got some good performances in there, but smaller movies.
Yeah, indie stuff. He's very much like a niche guy currently.
I mean, he does some voice work for Into the Spider-Verse and the Teen Titans movie.
I remember I think I read that he was pissed at what they ended up doing for that his Flash cameo for
the bad CGI.
Yeah, he said he was like, I saw the movie and that's not what we shot. I don't know where that came from, but that's not what we did. So I don't know.
Among the other many bad decisions that went to that movie. But fuck that movie, because they use the CGI Christopher Reeve, so they can fuck all the way off. Kick-Ass. Maybe Kick-Ass?
Yeah, Big Daddy, right?
Yeah. Or The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Those are both the same year. I'm looking at Wikipedia. Sorcerer's Apprentice was a big bomb, but that was Disney. And then Kick-Ass. So I'd say those are probably the last two major film roles he had before he spent like a decade doing really shitty stuff.
Yeah, I know when he was doing like, what is it, Drive Me to Hell and Knowing and all of this stuff, I was like, man, I hated him.
Yeah.
At that point, I was like, Nick Cage it was a joke to me. You know, I didn't really see him coming back, at least for me, in my taste or whatever. And then he just started doing this kind of like weird horror stuff and leaning into, you know, like his wacky kind of persona. Like Willy's Wonderland is completely, have you heard of that?
Isn't that like a Five Nights at Freddy's kind of ripoff?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have heard of that.
It shouldn't work and it should be dumb, but when you watch it, it's fun and it works because of him. You know, he has that kind of star power where you just accept these things because it's Cage and he's such a character on screen, you know. And I feel like Bringing Out the Dead is him like in his top form as far as like what he's able to accomplish and the different emotions that he shows. And like we were saying, how the film manages to take you on through all of these different subgenres of film or whatever. That's not easy to do and have it feel so not forced, you know?
I'm really high on this performance in this movie, as are you. So I think it's a criminally underrated performance from him. Definitely a top 3 in my opinion. Sounds like a top 1 in yours. So don't let Cage turn you off. If there's some people that are on the fence because they're like, oh no, about Nicolas Cage.
I know somebody very close to us who feels this way.
And to that, I can just say, mileage may vary, but let me point you in the direction of some of these great performances from him. But I mean, for those people that just aren't into him, like, you kind of have to remind them, hey, he was at one point like one of the best actors of his generation. And this is right in the middle of that.
And then for people, I feel like even though Con Air is not a great movie, he was doing like he was a big star.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, like he was kind of a smaller star, and it's the Oscar win that just kind of propels him forward. And, you know, I'm not a huge fan of Con Air, but, you know, The Rock and Face Off are incredible. And he's so fucking good in both of those. So I'm really stoked on those. And again, like Snake Eyes isn't a great movie, but at least for the first 2 acts, he's pretty fucking good in it.
Just watch 8mm. If you can.
Again, same year. He does 8mm and then he goes into Bringing Out the Dead. And he's very good in 8mm. I know that's not a movie for everyone because it's very dark. But a pretty solid flick. And a very, very good kind of another performance where he just kind of starts in one place and just gets dragged down into the depths as the film goes along. And he ends the film at a very dark place. So let's talk all these other great actors that are in the movie and their scenes against Cage, because Goodman and Sizemore and Ving Rhames are so fucking good as his partner on each night that again, a lot of those scenes play like a comedy.
Yes.
The bickering that he does with Goodman, and then just like the all-out comedy that is Ving Rhames, and then just the crazy like manic episodes with Sizemore.
Sizemore, who we also lost recently, right?
Yeah.
R.I.P.
Yeah. Who, I was going to say, this is one of Sizemore's best roles.
Absolutely.
In a decade when, as we said, when he passed away, he had so many great roles and so many good films from amazing directors. The run that he had in the 90s. And it's a shame that he kind of squandered that with his demons and his substance abuse. His domestic abuse charges against Heidi Fleiss, who was his girlfriend at the time. But he's fantastic in this movie.
All right, let's rewind and talk about Goodman for a little bit. The comedic relief.
Cage and Goodman, they were together in another movie that you and I spoke about last year, and that's Raising Arizona. So I don't know if he had been in a movie with Sizemore. He had been in a few movies with Ving Rhames. Just Con Air was one that he did just very recently before this one. Mm-hmm. And then he's in another, I think kind of another underlooked movie called Kiss of Death, which is a remake. Which Cage is very solid in, and Ving Rhames is in that as well. But him and Goodman are a lot of fun together. Goodman just like doesn't want to take the calls. He's like, oh no. He's like, I want to go and eat. We need to stop here. And he has that whole thing like, oh, I want to do beef lo mein. I've been thinking about it since I woke up. And then like, there's that long pause as they're driving, and Goodman's just like staring off into space, and all of a sudden he's like, oh no, I forgot. I had beef lo mein last night. He's like, I can't have the same thing 2 nights in a row.
Fried chicken.
Fried chicken and fries. How could he forget that he just had beef lo mein? But he was dreaming about it since he woke up in the morning.
Well, to his defense, I feel like those guys, they're
probably very stressed out.
Their lives probably are streamlined.
Yeah.
You know, everything's a blur for them. Goodman's so fucking funny. Like when he freaks out, Mark Anthony's character is like, he gets into an accident and he never fully recovers, so he's kind of like crazy and just running around the entire movie. And
Mark Anthony, who is not in a whole lot of movies, but is very good in this movie.
He is.
Yeah.
He is, right? But they end up picking him up. He's covered in blood, and he fucks up the back of their ambulance. And I love that scene where Nick Cage comes out from the hospital, to have a smoke or something, and then you just see Goodman like scrubbing down the interior of the ambulance. He's all, that's it, I can't take it anymore, I'm done.
Yeah, he's like cleaning up the ambulance at the end of the night, and he's had too much. He's over it.
Or how about when Mark Anthony just so fucked up, he just totally gets Cage with blood.
Yeah, when it's because he's cut himself
with the
multiple times with the broken bottle because he says he wants to die, and he's daring people to like kill him. And then Cage and Goodman show up at the scene, and he's covered in the blood, and he like kind of shakes his head, and he has the dreadlocks and everything, and all the blood just kind of splatters all over Cage.
And you just hear Goodman, oh yeah, he got you. He definitely got you. But yeah, it's just like, damn.
First of all, like the dispatcher for Goodman and Sizemore nights is Martin Scorsese.
Yes.
And did you listen to like all those calls?
Yes.
They're so fucking funny. All the random calls.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a woman being held hostage by her cat. There's, a guy who got shot who says his arm hurts. Like, but he got shot like years ago and now his arm hurts. And there's just like some really funny random calls.
The Mr. O one.
The Mr. O, which is Goodman doesn't want to go and pick him up. And that's one where they're sitting in the car and Goodman just got his chicken and fries. And Cage is like, oh yeah, we're going to get a call as soon as you get food. And that's exactly what happens. And the dispatcher is Scorsese. He's like, oh, you guys, you have to pick up, I guess Mr. O is well known. And Goodman does not want to deal with him. He says he's had to deal with him 2 or 3 nights that same week. And it's just, he's a drunk who just smells really bad. And Goodman doesn't want to do it. And he keeps telling Frank not to pick up the radio. And Scorsese's getting like more and more agitated with him. Pick up the radio. I'm going to send a captain to your location.
Zebra. Yeah.
6'3" Zebra. And Goodman's like, oh, pick it up. When I tell you not to pick it up, that means pick it up. So he picks it up and it's Mr. O. And he's like, no. And as they pick him up, he's bitching and complaining. And then they're driving him and he's like hanging his head out the window because of the smell.
When they take him to the hospital, they're like, oh no, not him.
Yeah, Grist doesn't want to take him. So they're like going to push him just outside and let him wait outside until they get it. It's obviously like freezing out there. But he's really funny. Goodman is the first partner. He's the one that's with them. The very first call that they take that we see in the film is Mr. Burke, who has a heart attack and is, for all intents and purposes, like brain dead because his brain wasn't getting the oxygen from his heart because it had stopped. And they revive him. It takes a while. And they're basically calling him dead, calling the doctor to have him pronounced dead. And then just then, his heart kicks in. And, he's like, oh yeah, we can call it. And Cage says, no, like his heart starts beating. He's like, no shit. And that's kind of the person that Cage is haunted by throughout this entire film. Rose as well, which is someone who died while he was trying to help her years ago. But Mr. Burke and kind of his specter at the hospital is what haunts Frank because Burke should be dead.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought him back and he's being kept alive like for what purpose? Because the family doesn't want to let him go. So he's like the start of all of this. And then that's how we obviously meet Mary, his daughter, who Frank gets to know over the course of these 3 days and nights, and becomes very close with her. But Mary is someone who obviously has her demons as well, and someone that he kind of forms this bond with. And then in the end, they kind of help each other. He kind of helps her move on, knowing that her father is passed and he's not trapped anymore, and she helps him move on from the guilt that he carried with him, that he felt over the loss of Rose, who he couldn't save.
Yeah, it's kind of this subtle romance between them, right?
And there's the scene where, she's just super frustrated with the hospital and what's going on with her father, where she kind of relapses into old habits, drug use.
We go into the Oasis.
The Oasis. By the way, Cliff Curtis is great in this movie.
Yes.
He's so fucking good. And I'd have to look up to see what else he had done before that. He's very good in Three Kings the same year, like a few weeks apart. But in this movie, he's so good.
He's also that's him in Training Day, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. All these performances. He's really popping right around this time. But I'd have to go back and look him up and see what he had done prior to popping up in 99. But he's so good in. I'm gonna look him up right now. He's so good in this. Like very smooth. It's like his whole deal. He's like the drug dealer, but he like cares about people. I mean, he's from New Zealand, so he'd been in some stuff down there before he kind of pops in the U.S. Deep Rising, he's in Deep Rising. He's in 6 Days, 7 Nights.
That's right. I just rewatched Deep Rising the other night.
Deep Rising, he's in Virus, which is a very bad version of Deep Rising.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yep. And oh shit, that's right. He's the guy in the beginning of The Insider that Al Pacino is interviewing at the very start of that movie. Wow. So like he's in these 3 fucking incredible films within a month of each other in 1999. I mean, he doesn't have a big role in The Insider. He's only in that very first part in the beginning. He jumps into some bigger stuff. He's great in Training Day, as you mentioned. And then what's he done? I think he's in the Avatar movie, the new Avatar.
Way of Water?
Yeah. Yes, he is.
So then he's very relevant.
Yeah, I mean he's still doing lots of good work. I was just wondering kind of what he had done before that and what's he been up to. He was on that stupid fucking Walking Dead show, unfortunately.
Which one? The original one?
No, the Fear the Walking Dead, like the spinoff. Because I met him at Comic-Con, when we were doing the screening of the first episode.
You met him?
Yeah, for Comic-Con.
Nice.
Not like, hey man, how's it going? Talk to him and everything, but like he was there to do that stuff. So like he was like we were doing all the stuff and him and I think Kim Dickens. I forget who else was there when we did the screening for that. So he got stuck on that shit for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Got killed off, thankfully. That way he can go and do something else. So Mary falls into this old habit and goes and scores, basically. And that's where we meet up with Cy, who's Cliff Curtis's character, who's so good. And he's got this whole spiel about how, like, he just needs to relax. I gave her something that'll let her sleep. And he's just like his look and the way he talks. And he sounds like a salesman.
Yep.
He sells that whole, like, the Day Rise Enterprises. Just have, like, random people, like, crashing in his apartment. There's, like, the volcano painting on the wall. It's, like, spewing smoke.
Yeah. The fish tank, the elaborate fish tank.
We talked to Michael K. Williams, who was a shooting victim earlier on in the film. That's another funny scene. Let's go back to that. Not that Michael K. Williams getting shot was a funny scene, but that's after they pick up Noel. After he sprays the blood all over Cage.
Yep.
And he wants to die, and Frank convinces him, hey, like, I can't kill you out here. There's too many people, but we can kill you at the hospital. You just need to come with us. Obviously, tricking him to get him to the hospital so he can get some help.
It's like we have a room where we terminate people.
He's like, well, how? Well, there's pills and gas and injection. He's like, oh, pills. So he's like, okay, so he helps him up. And then as they're going down there, that's when Sizemore rolls up and he's like, oh, hey, I know this guy. And apparently Sizemore was Cage's partner at one point in time, like, regular partner. So there's some history between them, and obviously Larry, who is John Goodman's character, is put off by him. But while they're dealing with him, and while Tom Walls, right? So while they're dealing with him, Tom is trying to beat up Noel, which will come back into play later on in the film. But while he's trying to beat him up, they get a call about a double shooting down the street. So they roll down there, and Tom goes with them. And one of the shooting victims is Michael K. Williams. And they're trying to save his life. So Cage says, "Here, you need to press this and hold this. And if you don't help him, like, I swear to God, I won't kill you."
Is he is Michael K. Williams' character, is he supposed to be a part of the Red gang?
Yeah, it's implied that they were caught like in a rival drug thing, and
Okay.
that's what got shot. So you can hear him. Someone's mentioning like they killed him over like the Red Death, which is like the new drug.
That's right. Yeah.
That the doctor at the hospital mentions at one point. And you can hear someone say, "Oh yeah, like these guys, like Outlaw shot these guys." Or like they work for Outlaw, like Tiger shot him, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Tiger is Cy's like right hand guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's in the apartment when Frank goes to visit, or when Frank goes to help Mary out.
Almost like a bodyguard type, right?
Yeah. So that's implied. This is based on a book, as you mentioned, a book which I've read and reread recently. So the movie sticks very, very close to the book, but obviously the book has a little bit more in it, and there's a little bit more about the drug thing in the novel.
Okay.
But that's a bit more explained, like who Cy is and Tiger and Outlaw and these dealers. But yes, Michael K. Williams was caught up in that and gets shot by whomever the other guy was.
The Noel joke between him and Frank when he's like, you gotta hold his hand, or I swear to God I won't kill you. That's where the kind of black comedy comes in, you know.
Noel has his issues. He obviously has some mental issues.
Yeah.
And you find out why, because Mary said that Cy or Tiger, one of those guys, ended up shooting him years ago, and he got shot in the head, and that's why he's messed up now.
Yes.
Because she says, "Hey, Cy's not a good guy." And this is he did this to Noel years ago, and that's why Noel is the way that he is. Was it when Tom meets up with him and says he's gonna like kill Noel, and he's like, "Oh yeah, at the hospital." He's like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, they're gonna kill me at the hospital." And even after he takes the beating, he's just kind of out of it still. He's like, "What happened?" Part of Frank's thing is, he's a paramedic and his job is to save lives, but he's kind of had this bad run where no matter what, someone is always dying on him.
Yeah.
No matter what he does, he just can't save anyone.
The string of failure.
Yeah.
Right.
And he says, it's when you save a life, like everything is just amazing. You feel like you're walking on air, but then, something bad happens and you lose. And it's just, just becomes your life, like just the guilt, and you just wallow in that. And that's where he is, because especially the Rose, who he lost, but then it's just everything else is just going bad for him. So the next night, his partner is Marcus, played by Ving Rhames. And Ving Rhames, who we actually meet the first night, because he's in the hospital waiting room telling the story to a younger paramedic about how he had saved someone's life. And then just hearing that story where he's talking about like some woman was hitting on him, but he brings probably the most comedy to the film. Just his whole persona, the way he interacts with Dispatcher Love, who
is
Queen Latifah, in a great performance, even though it's just her voice.
Yeah,
and she even gets her own special credit card at the end of the film, which is cool. And she's just so funny. She has all these calls, and she keeps calling for Marcus, and Marcus is like, "Oh, He's like smooth talking her. I remember that's like one of the first things in the trailer is, them getting a call. And he's like, I'm here, baby. I'm going to take care of you. And you could hear her just over the radio just rolling her eyes. Just completely exasperated with him. He's talking about, oh yeah, like she loves me, and then you find out that they went on a blind date and she hit him with a bottle. But yeah, that's one of the scenes in the trailer where he's like, I'm here, I'm gonna take care of you, and then like Cage kind of laughs. They go to, is their first call the cardiac arrest, the kid who overdosed?
Yes. They
go to that club, and they're like walking up the stairs, and they're, everyone's like, oh yeah, this guy's died. They're like, can you help him? And he just takes a look at me, he's like, yo, he's dead. They're like, oh no, we just got a record deal, like what are we supposed to do? And he's like, I don't know what to tell you, but this guy's dead.
And he's like, all right, what's his name? Is I Be Banging? He's like, what kind of name is I Be Banging?
Like, I don't know, that's just his name. It finds out that, yeah, it's a drug overdose, and Frank says, oh, it's just a drug overdose, we can save him with the Narcan, which is, if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of like an adrenaline, like an adrenaline drug. And so Ving Rhames is like, oh, this guy's dead unless one of you can tell me like what he was doing, stop bullshitting me. And they say, oh yeah, he was snorting a lot of this Red Death stuff. And he's like, okay, like, we need to hold hands, and we need to pray over this man, and maybe we can save his life. And he says, what's his name? I Be Banging. He's like, what kind of name is that? I don't know, that's his stage name, or that's the only name I know him by. And then the girlfriend says, oh, it's like Frederick, is it Freddie Smith? Something like that. He's like, okay, Freddie. And she's like, it's Frederick. And he's like, okay, I Be Banging.
And he's super exaggerated.
And he's treating it like it's a revival, like a church revival. And then they give him the shot, and it takes a few seconds for it to kick in, and then the guy, wakes up from the dead. He's like, thank you, Jesus, for saving this worthless man's life. And then they're like, wow, you guys are good. And he's like, oh, it's not us. He's like, it's the Lord. Like, the first step is love. And then he's just got some more funny interactions with Love. And she's like, I'm not your baby. Is it 52 young or 62 young? Is their call sign?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, I'm not your baby, young. Oh, man. Another one of my favorite scenes, because this is one that like we quote all the time, Joel and I. When Frank comes in for that shift, like he runs into the captain who's played by a guy by the name of Arthur J. Nescarella, who's one of those New York character actors. He's in a ton of those movies. He's in a ton of like Spike Lee movies. He's had like a regular part on The Sopranos for years. He's in Copland as one of the crooked cops. So good. He got that face. I read in the research on him that he used to be a Marine, and then he used to be a cop as well, so he's kind of got that whole like tough talking vibe,
yeah,
much like Dennis Farina. But he's the captain, and Cage goes in there and he's like, oh hey, he's like, out of 12 shifts this month, you've been late for 9, you called out sick for this many. He's like, what am I going to do with you? He's like, I guess I'm going to have to fire you. And he's like, Frank is like, oh, it's okay. Like, if you have to fire me, that's okay. Because obviously he's burned out. He doesn't want to do this job anymore. He just wants to be released from it. And it's almost like a catch-22. Like, he can't get out of the job no matter what he does.
But he's like, you know what? I'll fire you tomorrow.
So what Joel and I always quote, he's like, look, he's like, they want me to fire you. He's like, I've never fired anyone before. I told him, stick it right up your big one. He like does the thing where he kind of like, gives like the fist pump. I told them, stick it right up your big one. And he goes, pardon me, because the secretary is there.
Yeah.
Even though it's obvious that she doesn't care. He's like, I don't fire anyone. He's like, no, you swore you'd fire me if I came in late again. You swore it. And he's like, I'm going to fire you tomorrow. And he like Cage like starts pounding on the desk like in anger, and he just stops and he's like, "Better yet, like I'll forward you some sick time."
To take, he's all, "I'll forward you like a week of sick time." He's all, I'm gonna need more than a week.
Whatever he does, he just can't get fired. And the captain who should be firing him is just like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna fire you." He's like, "Oh, I need bodies, man." He's like, "It's like a weekend of full moons." And he goes through this list of people. You know, Larry, who was John Goodman's character, called in sick. You know, Larry Weber, stupid Stanley. He's like, He's like, "I got to put Marcus on 62 Young." He's like, he's not supposed to work 2 nights in a row. And it's just, the Ving Rhames stuff is hilarious. And you see that relationship with Love, and he sees Marcus is privy to, Frank hanging out with Mary a little bit, and, they give Mary a ride to the hospital. They pick her up because he has some information on the dad, and so he stops by to tell her the information, and she wants to go to the hospital to go see him. So he's like, "Oh, we're headed over there. We'll give you a ride." And that's one of my favorite scenes, like just the two of them riding in the back of the ambulance. It's a very naturalistic performance from the two of them. It's going over the bumps, and they're kind of like bracing themselves against the sidewall of the ambulance. And then they both kind of get like this little smile, like they're enjoying each other's company, even though they're not talking.
Yeah.
They're just enjoying each other's company. And I think the smile that Arquette gives is like really cute and just a very natural performance.
Can't believe they were married.
He was married to Lisa Marie Presley too, at one point in time.
Lucky guy. Like what? Okay.
So Marcus telling him, rule number 1 is don't fall in love with patients. Rule number 2 is don't fall in love with patients' daughters. And Cage is like, what about rule number 3? Don't fall in love with dispatchers named Love. He's like, "Oh, you don't know anything about rule number 3. And he keeps going on about love all night long. And then there's another really funny scene where they go, the woman is having abdominal pains. They're in like a slum, probably squatting. They go up and he's like, "Oh yeah, her stomach hurts really bad." And he's like, "Oh yeah, she's pregnant." He's like, "What? No, she's not pregnant. We're virgins. That's impossible." And he's like, "Hey, it's possible. She's pregnant." And Ving Rhames is, "You've never had a couple too many, fallen asleep." He's like, No, we're virgins. It's not possible. It's a miracle." I keep telling they're just like rolling their eyes at that. But then the babies are breech, and it turns out to be twins. And he's like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's some legs." And he's like, Ving Rhames just goes, "That's too many." Because it's 3 legs.
Yeah.
So they end up delivering the babies right then and there. And the first one, the one that Marcus helps out, is healthy and breathing and everything. And the second one that comes out, the one that Frank helps, is looks very frail, is breathing but doesn't look to be in good shape. And by the time they get to the hospital, the baby has stopped breathing. And unfortunately, that one they lose. And that's another thing that just, brings Frank down more. But then Marcus is really, like, Marcus has that feeling that Frank talks about earlier on in the film, where he's on air. He's like walking on air because he saved their life and he saved the baby's life. And then Cage he's over that, and he just wants a drink. It's time for the drink. And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's it. No more calls for the night." And then they get that one call from Love. He's like, don't do it. And Marcus is like, "Let's take it." He's all excited. He's like, "Only for you, baby, only for you." And then they get into the car accident.
Yeah.
Where he flips the van.
Because they had been drinking.
They'd been drinking, but, Marcus is just a little too eager and excited. A car pulls out in front of him, and he swerves really hard, and they end up flipping the van over. And that's when Frank's like, "Oh, I'm done. I quit. I'm not coming back."
What does Marcus tell him? He says something like, "You think if you quit, that those ghosts are going to quit you?"
Yeah, yeah. Which earlier on they have that discussion about, I am seeing the ghosts. He's like, "Oh, the people we lost." He's like, "Yeah, that's normal." And then when Frank sees Rose, she asks him like, "Why did you kill me?" And he's like, "Oh, I didn't mean to kill you." And Marcus hears that and he's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Not yet, but the night's still young." So and then after the accident, there's that little pause in the paramedic stuff, and that's when he meets up with Mary again, and Mary goes to score at Size, and he follows her at first. She doesn't realize that he's there. He follows her all the way to Size building, and she says, "Oh hey, like I'm here to see a friend of mine. Can you just stay down here and wait? If she won't keep me long if you're down here." And then he ends up following her into the building, and she says, "Oh, like, just stay here. I'll go inside. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, come and get me." And obviously she's not back because she's asleep, and Frank goes to see her, and then that's when he has the interaction with Sai. And I want to highlight Kaneda, who's played by Sonia Son.
Yeah.
Who is good in the movie. Another, like Michael K. Williams, another Wire alum. Check out The Wire if you haven't seen it. I know that's a movie or a TV show I always talk about because I love it so much. But just had an incredible cast, and Sonia Son and Michael K. Williams were two of the core cast members of that show throughout its run. But she's Kaneda, who is Sai's girlfriend, who's in the apartment with him. And she has that good scene and that good interaction with Cage where she brings him the water to take the pill that's going to, let him sleep. And she's like, "Oh, feel my pulse." And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's very strong. It's 2 beats per minute." So then he kind of has that freak out when he's on the drugs. But there's that wonderful scene where it's like kind of crazy. It's kind of like nightmarish.
Yeah.
It starts off that way, but then there's that wonderful scene where he's just like walking down the street and he's helping people. The people are like rising up from the ground and he's helping them up, each and every single one of them. And it's that feeling like where he's helping people and he feels alive. And then it reverts back into the nightmare, and he has the nightmare about how they lost Rose. She stopped breathing and they couldn't tube her. He kept missing the lungs and ending up in the stomach. And then that's when he wakes up and he's freaking out. That scene where the Rose stuff is really cool because it's shot backwards. So everyone's kind of got like this weird movement to them. The snow is falling upwards.
Uh-huh.
I always wondered like how that would be to try to act backwards. Because David Lynch does that in Twin Peaks sometimes. Where they have like some backwards stuff and like all the dialogue is backwards. And after he rescues Mary, for lack of a better term, they have a discussion on the street, and that's when she tells him about Noel and what happened with him, and how her father was always just such a nice guy to everyone but them, kind of treated them like shit. So she's got her own issues with her dad. But obviously cares about him because she's constantly at the hospital, constantly asking about him, wanting to know, what's going on, complaining about the doctors and the nurses. I keep asking the doctor this, he keeps poking himself in the eye. Then Frank says, "Oh, he's working the double." But they're great. Ida Totoro is one of the nurses, Nurse Krupp, who doesn't they're all full up. She doesn't want to take any more patients. Nestor Serrano's Dr. Hazmat. He's the main doctor there, and he's always joking around, and he obviously doesn't want to deal with it. And even when they bring in Mr. Burke, he's like, "Oh yeah, his pupils are fixing to dilate. This guy's plant food," but
right away.
But they're like, "Hey, he's still got a heartbeat. He's still alive." So they they know that they don't have the space to be taking on patients that are kind of no-hope patients. And Mr. Burke is obviously kind of a no-hope patient. He may have a heartbeat, but he's obviously gone. He's not there anymore.
So when they tell that story that's kind of off-screen that he keeps trying to pull the tube, is that he's trying to, like, force them to, like, kind of let him go?
It's just kind of that response. It's, he's kind of coming to, but obviously you have something down your throat that's uncomfortable. It's almost a reflex to try to pull it out. Whether or not that's him just being like, oh, I want to just go, or just, being aware enough to be like that, or just, like I said, just a reflex.
Like a motor function.
Yeah. I don't know, but that's why they have to keep sedating him, or strapping him down, basically, so he can't do that. Who is he being kept alive for? It's obviously not his benefit. It's the families, and even though by the dialogue you can tell that the nurses there and the doctor know that he's gone, why do we keep having to shock him back to life? It's because the family wants us to keep him alive.
Would you say that maybe he wanted to die? Because doesn't the son say when they get to in the beginning of the film, when they get to the apartment, that he started having chest pains and then locked himself in the bathroom?
Yes, he did. Maybe he just didn't want help. Maybe he just thought, this is it. Or maybe he was just scared, but I mean, obviously by his interactions with Frank, whether they're actually real or obviously in Frank's head because he's talking to him, he doesn't want to be there. He's in that kind of limbo state where I'm not dead, but I'm not even alive either. I just want to be let go. Mary seems to be the one that's always there. Her mom is there, but then they take her home, and, the brother isn't really around much. But Mary, for all her issues with her father, is still the one that actually cares enough to be there every single day, to be checking in on him and talking to the doctors and asking Frank, how he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So they go up to her apartment, and she's being kind of crude, and is like, "Oh, do you want to fuck me? Everyone else has." And he's just tired. He just needs some rest. He looks like hell. So he gets up into her apartment and just crashes on the couch, and you can tell that she doesn't want him there, but what can she do? So he stays, and then he wakes up and cleans himself up and goes back to work, even though he said that he was through. He goes back to work, and he ends up with his old partner, Tom Walls, Crazy Tom Walls, as I think Larry refers to him in the beginning. Or a crazy motherfucker, I think is what Larry says when he sees him coming up on that shooting. Or no, when they have Noel, excuse me. And it's Tom Sizemore, who was great in this movie. He has a really good speech when he's like, "Oh, this bus is a warrior. I've tried to kill him many times, but he will not die, and I have great respect for that." And then this is like the craziest part of the film. Like I talked about, like, the ramping up the film speed, the lights, the soundtrack gets crazy. It goes more punk, obviously with the Clash, and Big Brother and the Holding Company. And it's like you said, it's like a Tony Scott movie. He's like, "Oh yeah, like our mission is to save lives, blast off," and then like all of a sudden like the film speeds up. They're just driving along, and Frank is giving himself an IV because he keeps saying that he's sick.
Yeah, he makes himself like a cocktail in the back, pretty much, right?
Yeah, like the vitamin B, adrenaline, well, something else that he has in there. I don't know if it was insulin or like something that was going to help him. But then he climbs in the front seat. He's got like the full-on oxygen mask on.
Yeah.
He's got the bag, like the IV bag. And it's Tom is he's excited to be a paramedic, even though he's crazy. I think in the book he was a Vietnam vet. He was like a paramedic in Vietnam, so he'd seen all this crazy stuff. So I mean, obviously in the book that his character reads a little bit older if he was a medic in Vietnam, because that's 20 to 25 years removed from when the story takes place. But yeah, he's just like really excited, and then when he gets the call from Scorsese as the dispatcher, he's like, "Oh yeah, like we want our calls bloody." He's looking for the action. He doesn't want like some goofy thing. He wants something like really exciting. And their first call is the guy that tried to kill himself, and it's like some homeless person. And he's like, "You tried to kill yourself? It's not even bleeding, man." And then he's like, "Oh yeah, you want to die?" And he brings him into the back of the bus, and he's bullshitting him. And he's like, "Oh yeah, you need to put this patch on your head. It's very experimental. You need to keep checking the patch, and if it turns green, like you need to seek help immediately." He's like, "You could die." And the guy's just sitting there, and then that's when Frank comes in and looks at it. He's like, "This is the worst attempt at trying to kill yourself I've ever seen." And he tries to hand him his pocket knife. He's like, "This is how you do it. It's supposed to be like down. This way, not across." He's like, "All these people who got killed, who got cut down, who wanted to live, and you have the nerve to try to kill yourself and not even do a good job at it?" And then the guy just gets freaked out and like runs away.
What about the stuff with Noel?
Yeah,
towards the end, right? At
the end of the night, they're on this adrenaline high because they end up going to a shooting. Turns out that the shooting was Cy and his apartment. So they go to the shooting, and it sounds like a jumper call because Cy is hanging off the side of the building, and you find out as they get up there that he's not really hanging. He jumped and got caught on the iron fence on the balcony. Got himself impaled on the iron fence. So he's just kind of hanging off. But as they get the call, Walls is like, "Oh, someone's gonna kill themselves!" So like, hurry up. He's like, "I don't want to miss it." He's all excited. And then they get to the call, and it turns out that someone shot up Cy's apartment. Killed Kaneda, unfortunately. And Cy and Tiger both jumped like 2 floors down. And Cy ended up, missing and hitting the fence. So that's why he's hanging off the building. And Tiger ended up breaking both legs, crashing through the window, and ended up passing out.
He tried to crawl away, right?
Yeah, he tried to crawl.
Then he passes out. And they're just there making fun of him.
Yeah. Yeah, even like the cops and like the firefighters are like making fun of the scene. And there's a very good scene because Frank is the one to go and help Cy while he's being rescued, and he's talking to him, and it's a great scene between the two actors.
Because Cy says like, "I can't hold my head up anymore," right?
Yeah.
So then he kind of Frank reaches out to
holds his head up. And jokes with him. Cy asks about Kaneda, and he says, Kaneda's dead, and he's obviously very upset by that. But then he's like, "Yeah, like you can't kill me. I'm indestructible." And then there's that funny little bit where the fence, once they cut through the fence, it breaks, and he goes tumbling off the side of the building, and Frank is holding on to him.
Yeah.
And it's like, "Oh, good." The firefighters or the rescue. I don't know if they were FDNY or if they were police. They're like, "Oh, good thing we strapped you in, Frank." And Cy's like, "Who strapped me in?" And they're like, "Oh, I thought you did." "No, I thought you did." He's like, "We're sorry about that." They obviously didn't care. They wouldn't have cared if a drug dealer like took a header off the side of the building. So when they go to the hospital, and then they're on that high still, and then that's when Frank is like, "We have to take calls. We have to do something." And Tom's like, "What are we going to do? Like, there's nothing to do. There's no calls coming through." And Frank's like, we have to keep going. We have to keep moving. We're sharks. If we stop, we die. Like, let's break some shit. Let's get into a fight. Let's do something, because he's on that adrenaline rush. And then, Tom sees Noel and says, oh, I know who we can mess up. He's like, we can get him. And Frank obviously doesn't want to do it because he knows more about Noel and his situation now. But Tom says, no, this guy's a very bad dude. Like, I was really nice to him, but he keeps doing this. Noel's wandering the neighborhood, busting out windows. So he says, you go and talk to him and distract him. I'll come up behind him, we'll push him, and then, we'll beat the shit out of him. And Frank gets a little too distracted. He gets into it. He busts out the windshield and is very excited by that. Another parallel with Fight Club.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
And then Tom's almost like he's taken aback by the fact that Frank is being super friendly with him and not beating him up.
He's like, what the fuck, man? Because they were going to tabletop him, right?
Yeah. So then he's just like, let's go find him. If you find him, like, call out, and then I'll come by. And it's almost like Frank is descending into the depths of hell because, like, the lighting is weird. He hears the voices. He's calling out for Rose. There's the homeless people that are, sleeping underneath the trash and everything. So it's almost like a nightmarish scene. And then he sees some movement and hears some noise. And it turns out that he comes across Tom beating up Noel. And he doesn't want any part of it. So he pushes Tom off, and Noel's obviously in bad shape, so he says, hey, we're going to save him. And he tells Tom, go get the stuff, or else I'll call for backup, meaning he'll get in trouble. I don't want to necessarily say it's his redemption, but him saving Noel is kind of what he couldn't do for Rose. And he kind of projects that want to save someone. He projects that guilt that he has for Rose, and it obviously saves Noel's life.
Because Tom would have killed him.
Yeah,
right?
He would have probably beat him into a coma. But then, they take him to the hospital, they get him fixed up. And then there's that scene where Frank goes to see Mr. Burke. And at this point in time, he realizes that the best thing for Mr. Burke is to let him die. To release him from this pain and this limbo that he's in. So he goes and he has like what do you call those? Like the little patches where they attach like the leads to monitor your heart rate, your oxygen you're breathing and all that. He has those, and then he attaches Mr. Burke's wires to him, and then he takes the breathing tube out and he breathes through it, so that anyone watching like the signs or watching the monitors will know that he's still breathing, he still has a heart rate, even though he doesn't. Frank hooked himself up to take that, and then very quietly lets Mr. Burke die. And then when it's too late to save him, he puts everything back together so that when the nurses come in, they don't know, but he releases him from the pain that he was in. By killing him, he saved that life. And in the process kind of, saves his own. Maybe that sounds too cliche. But he does that and then goes to see Mary. And Mary in the doorway, takes on the form of Rose. And it's like he's talking to Rose and says, I'm sorry that I let you die. And she says, it's not your fault. And no one asked you to carry that guilt. You're absolved. And then it changes back to Mary, and he's talking to her and says that, her father has passed and he had just coded too many times. But even at that point in time, she's not terribly broken up by it. She's kind of, he put up a fight, and that's just what happens.
almost like a sense of relief.
Yeah.
Because you're able to get that closure.
Yeah.
Rather than just being stuck in limbo, you know?
Yeah. That relief, that acceptance. I mean, she knew that, you know, her father wasn't in great shape, but there was still that hope. But it was obvious that he's probably not going to survive. Or if he survives, he's going to be like this for a very long time. But yeah, it's that relief, that acceptance that she has. And then they go into her apartment and he kind of sleeps and she's there to comfort him. Yeah, I think it's a great last shot.
Yeah, because he's able to finally get that relaxation that he's been so desperately searching for the entire movie. You know, it's a very chaotic movie, and he doesn't seem to really catch a break until those final moments where he's like able to finally chill out with her, and they have each other. You know?
Yeah. I mean, he saves Noel. He essentially saves Mr. Burke. You know, he saves Noel's life. He saves Mr. Burke's soul, and gets that absolution from, you know, Rose's ghost. And now he can rest. Now he can get his closure. I do want to mention a really funny scene, which is just like there's no dialogue in it, but when he leaves the hospital after they bring in Noel and Mr. Burke passes, he walks out of the hospital and just the camera tracks with him, but as it tracks, you see Tom just like beating the shit out of the ambulance.
Yeah.
He's like, die, and he keeps, you know, he's hitting it with like I don't think it's a bat, it's like his flashlight or something. Crowbar, whatever.
Crowbar, I think.
He's just like beating the shit out of the ambulance. I think that's in the trailer too. I remember like when I was seeing that trailer, there was all these like crazy scenes that made me want to see the movie even more. And then there's like this one scene where you just, as he's walking by, you just see Sizemore in the background like beating the shit out of the ambulance. You know, I think that wraps us on the movie. We can get into some other stuff.
All right.
But you know, what else? Do you have any other thoughts on the actual film or any like other scenes that you want to highlight? I mean, I feel like there's probably a bunch of scenes that I wanted to highlight that I'm forgetting about now.
Well, I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Would you agree that the way that they show Cage's or Frank is almost like addicted to the job?
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, he says like he wants to quit and he's going to get fired, and you know, but he keeps coming back. You know, he could just stop showing up.
Even when he quits and then he goes and he finds Mary on the street and he's wearing street clothes, but he still has a stethoscope for no, like, why?
Yeah.
He's just wearing that. I was just curious on if you picked up on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously burned out on the job, but he does keep coming back. I think it's almost like I think he almost has that gambler mentality where like, I have bad luck now, but eventually something is going to go right. I love that whole last third of the movie with Sizemore. I think like the energy that he brings and like that the movie switches up its energy at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like the camera angles get crazy. There's the shot of the ambulance like driving down the street where it's like sideways.
Going back to Goodman and Frank on it's the first night, right? Mm-hmm. When they're like on the pier. Mm-hmm. And they get that call and they were kind of like dozing off and Goodman is like driving towards the water. Yeah. And he's like, no, that's the wrong way. Turn around. That's the water.
Yeah, it's like he woke up and it was just reflex to start driving even though he's not really paying attention to where he's driving to.
And you just see that kind of like wide shot of the ambulance turning around.
Yeah, he doesn't shake him awake either. He like slams on the horn and jolts him awake.
Yes. Very good sound design in this too.
Sound design is great. The soundtrack, as we've talked about a couple of times, is incredible. That's REM is playing in that scene. The The Clash, The Who, like you mentioned, Big Brother and the Holding Company,
the
Marvelettes.
The most iconic, I think, track for me is that Van Morrison
the TV
opening.
sheets.
Yes.
Yeah. And it comes back a few times during the film.
Almost like a, what would you call it?
It's like
a
the theme. Yeah. But yeah, that's another one of my favorite Scorsese soundtracks, because that's about the time I was really getting into The Clash. And then I heard those two tracks in the movie, and I was really excited.
Did you say Sinatra yet?
No, he's not actually on the official soundtrack.
Oh no, they don't include that.
No, they don't have the Sinatra track. They don't have the Jane's Addiction track that's playing when they go into the club and they revive "I Be Bangin'." I don't know if it's 10,000 Maniacs or just Natalie Merchant, which is the song that's playing when Frank and Mary are riding in the ambulance, in the back of the ambulance together.
I think when I looked it up, it is Maniacs.
It is Maniacs?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if it was her solo stuff or part of the Maniacs. Yeah, just a great soundtrack. Scorsese is someone who always has these amazing soundtracks, and that one does not disappoint. And then again, shout out to Elmer Bernstein, who does the score, which doesn't play a whole lot, but in the scenes where it does play, is either kind of spooky and eerie or a little bit more, not bombastic, but more stately. Like I said, it almost sounds like a Terrence Blanchard score from a Spike Lee movie in some scenes, and in some scenes sounds like something right out of Ghostbusters. You mentioned the cinematography by Robert Richardson, who we've talked about before plenty of times on this show. Worked with Scorsese a lot, has worked with Oliver Stone a lot, worked with Tarantino a lot, has won Oscars for, for JFK, for Hugo, and, oh God, what was the other one that I know he won for? Oh, The Aviator. So it's his three biggest collaborators. He's won an Academy Award for at least one of their movies. And apparently he's been a frequent collaborator with Ben Affleck on the last couple of movies, and also Antoine Fuqua. He shot the Equalizer 3.
Oh, wow. Okay. I still need to see that.
Me too. I missed it. But he has his own, like, kind of significant or distinctive style too, where it's like kind of the harsh, the real, like, bright lighting.
Yeah.
In some scenes. And every time I watch like JFK or Casino, it's like, oh, like, definitely. He's got like that harsh lighting. That's like a part of his signature. But yeah, cinematography is fantastic in this movie. So as you mentioned, it opens up October 22nd. Fight Club opens up on the 15th, and I think Three Kings had opened up on the 1st of that month. So a busy month. The Insider opens up about 2 weeks after this. I think Insider is the first weekend in November. So a big, like, really strong stretch. Opens up in 4th place. Bummer. The Best Man. We talked Taye Diggs last year. That opens up brand new. It only opens up to like 6.1 million, 6.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
Bummer. Best Man opens up to 9. Double Jeopardy with Ashley Judd and Tommy Lee Jones, which is in its like 4th or 5th week.
Okay.
Is better at 7.6 mil. And I think the second week of Fight Club, week 2 of Fight Club is 6.3 million. So it got beat out by all those. It's a bummer, having a Scorsese movie not open up very strong and open up, down the line. I read that the audience gave it like a C-, like the audience score.
Cinema score.
Score, right?
Yeah.
Whoever they pull for cinema score, fucking morons, dude. They gave like Drive like an F or something.
Really?
They gave it Drive like a really low score.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Like everyone that they pull for cinema score like wants to see a fucking Michael Bay movie or something. Like a bad Michael Bay movie.
When I said earlier in the show that you don't really see paramedics presented in film this way.
Mm-hmm.
I am kind of thought about how Michael Bay did that film Ambulance.
I was going to shout out Ambulance when you said that.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, what about Isa Gonzalez in Ambulance, even though it's fucking ridiculous?
It's ridiculous, and she still gets kind of shoved with not a lot to do, you know. And I wanted to make that comparison as to like something like this movie and then that, where it's like, yeah, she's there, but it's like whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
Or when she has to do like open heart surgery on a guy like in the middle of a fucking high speed chase. Ridiculous. That movie's kind of enjoyable though. I said this last year on our year-end show. Like 2/3 of it is pretty fucking enjoyable.
Because I think I told you, I was like, yeah, I was disappointed, and you were like, I thought it was okay.
I was like, yeah, I wasn't that disappointed in it. I don't know if I said this when we talked about it last year in the year end, but it was probably like the most fun I've had watching a Michael Bay movie since like The Rock or something.
That says this is
for at least the first 2/3.
Saying something.
A lot of the other reviews I had pulled for it, they were just kind of whatever about the movie, and they were just unfairly comparing it to Taxi Driver. Because it's New York at night, it's very gritty, it's Paul Schrader, so they're just like, oh, this is just like Taxi Driver, only he's a paramedic. But like I said before, Frank Pierce is absolutely nothing like Travis Bickle. I mean, he's not a sociopath. He does care. He might be looking for redemption, but he's not going to do it through extreme violence.
I mean, the narration, I can see some of the shots are reminiscent of Taxi Driver, but as far as story goes, no. Different era.
Yeah, I mean, there's New York at night, especially in grittier neighborhoods. There's a look to it. I get it. You know, steam coming up from the streets. There's a shot of him behind the wheel that's almost like a Taxi Driver shot. You know, where like you have like the red light kind of like flashing on his face. But it's not Taxi Driver. But a lot of people would compare it to that, and I think that might have been what harmed it. Its initial success.
You would think that would be something that people would be into, or be like, oh, he's going back to like his roots, you know? It's weird that it would play against him. Like, think of it in this context. When The Hateful Eight was coming out, everybody was like, oh, it's like he's doing Reservoir Dogs, like in a different setting.
But
like
only a Western.
Yeah, like he's going back to like his kind of closed off quarters, like where he started. And everybody was down.
Yeah.
So how is it, you know, what was the problem with this one?
I don't know. And he had an incredibly varied filmography in the 90s. Because he starts off with Goodfellas, doing a gangster movie, and then does like a genre movie basically in Cape Fear.
Yep.
You know, which is a very good genre movie, but also it's kind of like, oh, that I would never have expected him to do that film.
Pretty brutal.
Yeah. But then he does The Age of Innocence, which I think is a gorgeous film, a movie which I really love. Then he goes right back into, crazy gangster stuff with Casino. And then he makes like a very like quiet Dalai Lama drama with Kundun. And then he goes into this, and it's like crazy and genre hops the entire film. So it's the movies that he made in the 90s, he had like a lot of different things going on. So like, why wouldn't you be excited to see that? And then he does like some bigger swings once the 2000s come along. You know, one of which is extremely successful for him because he finally wins an Academy Award. Even though, hot take, I still don't think that should have been the movie he won for.
Yeah, he could have won like years before. I'm not mad at that because I do love The Departed.
I love the movie too. I'm not talking shit on the movie at all. And I'm happy that he got the recognition for it. But, I mean, there's so many other movies that he should have been recognized for that they kept fucking him over on.
Prior to, yeah.
And then, finally they're like, oh, well, we'd better do it for this. Who knows? He might be dead soon. And he's still kicking, almost 20 years on. He has a very real shot at winning something this year. With a filmography that was as varied in that decade as his was, like, every single one of those movies is different. And you could say, well, Goodfellas and Casino are two gangster movies, but they're so different from one another.
I hear that a lot, where they think it's like the same movie.
And then, again, like, it's, the same core cast, the same co-writer, because he wrote with Nick Pileggi, but it's a totally different movie. Even watching them back to back, like, the whole vibe of the movies is completely different. So it's just a bummer that this movie was a bomb. It only made about half of its budget. And it was kind of just written off and forgotten about. But this is what Roger Ebert says. He gave it 4 out of 4 stars. To look at Bringing Out the Dead, to look indeed at almost any Scorsese film, is to be reminded that film can touch us so urgently and deeply. Scorsese is never on autopilot, never panders, never sells out, always goes for broke. To watch his films is to see a man risking his talent, not simply exercising it. He makes movies as well as can be made.
That's high praise.
Yeah.
The highest, right?
Yeah.
Perfect score.
And like I said, I unfortunately couldn't find any other great reviews or even like really negative reviews of it.
Just kind of pandering in the middle?
Yeah, just kind of like, I guess the movie's okay. It's very much like Taxi Driver. So we were talking about Ebert and Scorsese because they had a very good relationship with one another. Scorsese even guested on the show. I think after Siskel had passed, guested on the At the Movies, where he was naming like the best movies of the 90s.
Yep.
With him. Check that out on YouTube if you can. And if I'm not mistaken, they talk about Heat. But Scorsese and Ebert are having a discussion later on. Scorsese, as you mentioned, was in and out of the ambulances because of his parents and his parents' illnesses. I think his mother is passed by this point in time. His dad is definitely passed. But he says, I had 10 years of ambulances, my parents in and out of hospitals, calls in the middle of the night. I was exercising all that. Exercising like The Exorcist exercising, not exercising like at the gym exercising. Those city paramedics are heroes and saints. They're saints. I grew up next to the Bowery watching the people who work there, the Salvation Army, Dorothy Day's Catholic Worker Movement, all helping the lost souls. They're the same sort of people. And he made a movie about them. And then Thelma Schoonmaker, his longtime editor, had this to say. She says, it's the only one of Scorsese's films I think that hasn't gotten its due. It's a beautiful film, but it was hard for people to take. Unexpected, but I think it's great. What happened was the film was about compassion, and it was sold, I think, as a car chase movie. I don't agree with that, per se. When I saw the trailer, I said, wait a minute, that's not what the movie's about. I think people were made nervous by the theme of it, which I think is beautiful. I think it'll get its due. And hopefully it does. By people who might not have seen this film. Hopefully we'll be inspired to check it out based on our show.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm hoping that we're talking glowingly of it.
And also just things like The Killers of the Flower Moon was released recently. Mm-hmm. And I feel like when somebody watches a movie, not specifically that movie, but you have a filmmaker come out with a new movie, and sometimes people are inspired by that when they go see that new movie to jump back into someone's filmography. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that with Killers being out now, people are going to go back and hopefully find this if they're not already aware of it.
Yeah.
And be like, yo, what the fuck? Why didn't I know about this? Because this one's nobody's talking about it, and nobody has. It's not really in the conversation at all.
Yeah.
Like, where's the cultural footprint that it should have, right? Especially coming from somebody as respected as Martin, right? But it's also something that I wanted to say earlier is that I feel like just there are some films that are destined to be cult. movies. I guess this is one of them.
I guess so, and it's a director working at the top of his form. I think it's an actor in top form. The supporting cast is killer.
Yep.
The soundtrack is killer. The editing, the cinematography, all the stuff that should have been recognized or should have been talked about, should have made this movie a bigger hit. And I don't know. Again, maybe it just got lost in the shuffle of everything else that was happening that year and that fall.
What's your rating? Do you think it's a perfect movie?
I think it's pretty fucking great. I don't know if I would go so far to say perfect, but I am hesitant to say a lot of movies are perfect. Do I love it? Do I think it's perfect? Probably. People can argue with me on that, but I mean, like, how many other Scorsese movies do I think are perfect? There's quite a few of them. But I mean, you obviously like this movie.
It comes very close. Very close. But like you said, the guy has almost nothing but bangers. So it's kind of hard to have that list, you know?
Yeah. So I told you we were going to get into Academy Award stuff.
Yeah.
Because 99 is a very strong year in film, and unfortunately the Academy Awards didn't really reflect that. They kind of skewed a little middle of the road, which is craziness. American Beauty famously wins Best Picture that year, which we've talked about on this podcast before.
You're not a fan? Yep.
Not a fan. When we talked Road to Perdition, I told you Sam Mendes' follow-up to American Beauty, Road to Perdition, is a masterpiece. Should have won him the accolades that American Beauty won, because American Beauty is so fucking mediocre, with a mediocre performance from Kevin Spacey. And for some reason, that was winning all these awards. There's only 2 movies in that Best Picture 5 that I think are worthy of being there. One of which is The Insider, which you know how I feel about Michael Mann. And the other is The Sixth Sense, which was a phenomenon. But The Cider House Rules, get the fuck out of here with that shit. The Green Mile, which I do like, doesn't hold a candle to some of the other movies that year. Doesn't hold a candle to Shawshank Redemption. Theoretically, we sometimes get into this. This is my pick for the 5 best movies of the year. Okay? In no particular order, we have this film, Bringing Out the Dead, Fight Club, The Insider, gotta go with Michael Mann every time, Magnolia, and Three Kings. Those are my 5 for that year. And that's an incredible year. Those are my 5 favorite movies from that year. Like, Fight Club probably isn't going to win Academy Awards. Like, I'm not shocked that wasn't nominated. But the other ones, why Cage isn't up for a Best Actor, I have no idea.
If this were to come out now, it probably would have been recognized a little more for something. Sound design, something, right?
Yeah, well, it's comes at a weird period where Scorsese isn't really recognized for much. And now it seems like whenever he puts out a movie, he's in the conversation for the awards. It's like whatever movie he puts out now, like whatever directing job he does, he's always up. Except for Silence, which apparently no one saw.
Did you see that?
Yeah, it's good.
It's good?
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are my 5 movies of the year. Director, again, Sam Mendes, who wins Best Director. Why? I don't know. There's nothing spectacular in that movie. So here we go. Best Director, this is what the Academy says. They say Sam Mendes for American Beauty, Lasse Hallström for Cider House Rules, Spike Jonze for Being John Malkovich, which I love. Again, I love Adaptation even more, though. I think Adaptation is a better movie.
Okay.
But Being John Malkovich is a crazier movie. Michael Mann, and then M. Night Shyamalan. So a few wild cards in there, but I would go Scorsese, Fincher, Michael Mann, Paul Thomas Anderson, and either David O. Russell for Three Kings or Spike Jonze for Being John Malkovich. I think M. Night Shyamalan, I think that movie is more a triumph of the writing than his direction. Yeah, the direction can throw you off, but I think it's the script that really, where that movie really comes in. The actor is Kevin Spacey, Russell Crowe, Richard Farnsworth for The Straight Story, Sean Penn for some fucking Woody Allen movie, and Denzel Washington for The Hurricane. Denzel absolutely should have pulled that award that year. I'd put Cage up. Obviously, Russell Crowe, who I think is phenomenal in The Insider. Matt Damon in The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Uh-huh.
And then I had either a three-way tie between Norton for Fight Club, Jim Carrey for Man on the Moon, or Bruce Willis for The Sixth Sense. But Denzel Washington absolutely should have walked away with that award.
So he doesn't win until Training Day, right?
He wins for Training Day, which is a great performance. But like I've said before, I think Training Day was a makeup for not winning for The Hurricane. Just like Russell Crowe winning for Gladiator the following year is a makeup for not winning for The Insider.
Yep.
Even though, again, that would have put him and Washington up against each other, and it's kind of hard to say, but I think Washington
still takes it.
That performance in The Hurricane is incredible. So I definitely would have thrown Nick Cage into the mix because I think he's great in this movie. And I think Scorsese should have been up there. A lot of people probably would have said, no, it's a lesser Scorsese. It's not his strongest work and not up against some of the other people that were up there. But, I mean, Paul Thomas Anderson, Michael Mann, Fincher, I think they all belong in there.
Yeah. Did you want to plug a little teaser for the end of December?
Our Christmas episode, which will be happening in a few weeks. So get ready for that. We're going to stay in 1999. We're going to talk about a very divisive film. I don't want to say a whole lot more. It definitely takes place at Christmas time. That's why we're talking about it.
All right, I guess that's it, right?
Yeah.
Go watch Bringing Out the Dead. It's amazing. Go check out Scorsese's filmography while you're at it.
Watch some of those underrated movies, man. Watch
Yeah.
After Hours and watch Hugo. Although Hugo was a pretty solid hit and got a lot of awards recognition, but then didn't win anything. But go watch Hugo.
King of Comedy?
King of Comedy, which I recommended a few months back, which is amazing and has just such a great De Niro performance.
Yep.
So go and check those out. And watch Silence, because it's a good movie.
It is. Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield, right?
Liam Neeson.
Also, sorry for my weird voice. We got on air and then my allergy sinuses started messing up. I don't know what's going on.
Maybe it's the AC in the room or something.
Maybe.
I always have trouble if I go to like a hotel and I stay in a room.
Yeah.
It usually starts bugging me.
So I apologize for this. Thank you for sticking it out.
There's a gigantic box of tissues on the table, like right next to Wesley.
Yep. Sometimes you have to do what you got to do.
That's right.
Thank you, Chris, for showing up.
Thank you, as always, for having me, dude. You know, I love talking movies with you, especially movies that are underrated and underseen. This being one of them.
I know last month we did it over the phone. So it was a cool return to form to come back to the studio and do it in person.
Mm-hmm.
Until next week, this is Chris Pawlak and Wesley Swanson signing off, saying good fight.
And good night.
That's right.
What? You don't like the radio.
That's not the police band. It's your fire department scanner in your bag.
Oh!
Ladder 4, respond to a 1022. 6th flight, residential, 534, West 32.
Let's do it. Might be a good one.
There are no good fires. People die in fires. People get burned up in fires. People can't breathe.
That's what we're here for. Let's go.
6-3. Don't push it, Larry.
Well, you're burned out, man. You're scorched.
Not yet, Larry. I'm still burning. If you get any closer, I'm going to put burn on you.
6-3 Zebra. 6-3 Zebra. Zebra 3, I need you.
You see? He's giving it to us anyway.
Zebra, are you there? I'm holding it unconscious at 9th and 41st.
No! 3 o'clock in the morning, that can only mean one thing.
Mr. O.
Mr. O, I'm not answering.
Answer the radio, Zebra. You know it's that time.
4 times this week I've had them. Aren't there any other units out
Zebra,
there?
are you there?
Don't answer it. They'll get somebody else.
63 Zebra. Answer me now, or I'm sending a captain to your location.
Frank, when I say don't answer it, that means answer it. You can do me that favor at least. 6-3, Zebra.
Yes, Zebra. You'll be driving to the man who needs no introduction. Chronic Caller of the Year 3 straight, and shooting for number 4, Duke of Drunk, the King of Stink, our most frequent flyer, Mr. O.
10-4. Don't do it. Not this time.
Relax, it's a street job. It's easy except for the smell. You just throw him in the back, zip over to Mercy. No blood, no dying. That's how I look at it. He's just a drunk.
It's not our job to taxi drunks around.
Yeah, but they're just going to keep calling.
Someone's going to die someday because of this bump.